Hi everyone, I'm Neil Snape and I'm going to show you how I edit images in Lightroom on a typical model test. I'll show you all the steps, how I do it, and it's purely visual. It's a lot of fun and it's easy to do. So I will show you all the steps necessary, starting with the raw image and showing you what it looks like after it's edited in Photoshop. Let's get started. Okay, so this is as it was shot, raw, with no corrections whatsoever. I'll click the reset just to show you. The first thing I would do is I'll probably crop the top of the picture. It was shot a little bit wide, and you can see that if the lock is closed, it will retain its original constraint, which is rectangular, coming from a Canon 5D3. I'll crop in a little bit more, and that's about right. If you press R, it's the shortcut for a crop tool, and it'll take you back out again. Now, looking at the image, I can see that for me it's shot fairly flat, which is fine. It's an easy light to use, does a great job for the model's eyes and the skin. The light's fairly even. It's a little bit shadowed on the top. You can see on the background in this area that there was a shadow that was coming across. So she's a little bit dark on the top of the head as well as the background. But you can see that there's a color cast, a double pane window. You could use an X-Rite color checker to maintain and easily correct for the colors that were actually seen by the camera. You place the X-Rite color checker or passport in front of the model, and that way you can either verify each different patch or just use the neutral gray on the other side of the card. So let's get started. If you click on the eyedropper and bring it in, anywhere you click in here, it will indeed turn that to a neutral gray. When I look at this image, so I definitely will increase slightly the contrast in the darks, and I will also move around the lights, and I do that in the, of course, in the tone curve. But what I like to do in this image is I'm probably going to see what happens if I add a little bit of split toning. Split toning is one of the only areas that's not actually manipulating image data. It's actually adding color into it, which didn't exist in the original. So you have to be fairly careful with that one. When the saturations are set to 0, it's the same as having no addition of color whatsoever. The way I do it is I just increase it a lot, see where it is going to add the color to and what colors I want to add. For her, I want to turn it into a warmer color, not too golden, so that's getting a little bit too far. And you can see it come in, just want a little bit in the around there is probably maybe even a little bit less. So it's a little bit in the reds, not too yellow there. And then I'll just take that back down again to a reasonable amount. And then I will go up, and I'm going to take this up, add even more color. Add in a little bit, actually, of blue back into the highlights. So it's usually I head into around the blues, which might be around somewhere around there. And you can see that I turn up the saturation really high just so I can see where I am. And this one, actually, you don't really need much. You just need just enough that it affects it. That's the first step. You can turn these on and off the panels by this little tiny box and see where we are. So you can also quickly see that by adding a bit of color back into it, we've changed the feel of the image, which is quite nice. I'll go back to the basic panel, and then I will start to tweak what I think. Overall, the image is quite light in here. It's not overexposed at all, because you can see you still have room. And it's not underexposed either. It's just basically flat. Now, it'll be flat until we start changing things like clarity or image contrast. If I go into clarity, I can increase it just a little bit, and that way it's actually just going to move around just a little bit of the local mid-tone contrast. I will probably take down my exposure a little bit just to see what it looks like. And there I'm starting to add more color back into it. Looks quite good. Most of the time I take down the contrast a little bit because I can always dodge and burn to add back in volume, and that way I keep a nice roundness in the skin without making it too crunchy. Now for the highlights, I might take the highlights up a little bit to see what happens, and when I do that I can see that in this area it actually becomes too bright, too hot. So I'm actually going to take it down so it evens it out a little bit, not very much. And in the shadows I might increase the shadows a little bit because I can see the differences in the hair are a little bit too extreme, and then I'll back up the highlights, and I can see that it makes sense that when I increase this one in the shadows, that actually the highlights then I can take up too. Then it takes up both the levels. These are the selectors for the information in the actual image area. Now let's just take down so it's not oversaturated, and I think that looks a lot better. And I'll take down in the color here too, because she was a little bit orange because I had added color again. So I'm taking this down in the overall saturation, and yet I'm still adding back in again in split toning a little bit of color. I think that looks pretty good. And in the tone curves, just play a little bit until you visually see. If I go up too high, it starts to break up the image. In this case I want to even it out a little bit, so I might just take it down just a little bit. Lights, again, I can make it easier for me in retouching, so I take down the lights. Darks, can play with them until I start to feel the volume of the image come together. Don't need to take these down very far. I often split the differences, so I move out the start point in the shadows, and I move the slider for the highlights for the start point where these sliders affect the image, which is indicated as you move these sliders. It actually changes the zone at which it starts. Now I think that all looks good. Go back to the color, and you can see in the color that in the lips we're a little bit dense, and that's because it's mostly red. So what I do to make her a little bit more fresh is I just go up in those, and you can see that when I do that it also affects other areas. If I go way up it gets silly, but you can see where the zones are that are affected by that. So I'm going to take those up just a little bit, I think. And there I would have to resaturate because I'm going lighter. Oranges, you can see that we're mostly composed in orange in this image because that's where we set the values, and I'm actually just going to take those values up a little bit to make it a little bit more clear. Quite a nice brilliance in the hair just by taking up the color. The other colors are not really present in this image. I'll go back to panel 1 and just play just a little bit more just to see where I am. If I can make the image more impact, and I think it's good right around there. Once I'm happy with overall with the image, with the look and the feel, which in this case I am, I dodge and burn very slightly overall in the image, and there I'm going to increase the density, exposure follow along in areas where it naturally was falling, the light. And I need to just like to brighten up the chins all the time. And I always just so slightly brighten the top of the lip. You know, probably underneath here. It saves me time in Photoshop. And sometimes I follow along there. You can, if you like, do a second one. Increase a bit the highlights as well. Give a little bit of shape in the hair. Make it a little bit more alive. It's looking very good. I can add a new pin, and I have a custom saved out. Any of these settings you can save out, and I always have one saved out called Iris Dodge. And that one, I just lighten a little bit the eyes and change a couple of the settings, as you can see, that are here. And I will just go just the slightest bit lighter, not so it's artificial, just so it's just a little bit more alive. And as far as the face goes, that looks pretty good. I might take down the exposure. Naturally follow where the shadows fall. Shadows actually they build volume. So if you put them in the right place, you can actually shape the image quite well. A little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. And under the chin gives you actually separation. Makes the face come forward. You can also add a new pin with clarity, but taking the clarity down to save you retouching time later. I find that clarity works quite well in negative when you take away detail as well. One thing you can do in Photoshop 5, actually get rid of little marks, but you can do this just as fast or faster in Photoshop. And I think that's about all there is. I might be just a little bit darker up here, and as I said, I will probably either use a graduate this way, exposure up a little bit. You can do this, hold down the shift key to constrain it to flats. Yeah, it looks pretty good, so I'll leave it at that. This is the image finished in Lightroom, ready to go to Photoshop for just the slightest details, like I might use the healing brush to take out this hair that's in the center. Use clone tool in the light mode just to lighten just so slightly this area by sampling just underneath. Same thing for this side. And that's about it. That's about all that I would want to do to this image. This is what we just did now. This is the image that I had done previously in Lightroom on raw. Actually, we did a better job. There it's a little bit green. And there's the image coming from the other one that was done in Photoshop. I took out the hair that was on the face. I took out their finger that was sticking out the side here. Subscribe to my channel so that I can keep you up with all these videos that I'm producing, helping you with Lightroom and Photoshop and shooting. So see you again. Thanks.